Hi, good evening, everyone. This is Professor Tennyson Mokuchini. I am the project leader for the Master's and Doctoral Support Program, and also am the Acting Dean for the College of Graduate Studies. Welcome back to the first formal session of this Master's and Doctoral Program that we run. Before I get into anything, some of you may be brand new to this platform because you have not attended any of these sessions. So we generally run from 6 p.m. South African time. I apologize, we're 3 or so minutes late. We generally are never late, but the first session of the evening had some slight hiccups. We also going to be, as part of this program, we run the sessions. After we've run the sessions, we give access to the link to everybody, so you can access the recordings after the fact. Many of you will be familiar with MS Teams, but maybe not so familiar with this version called MS Live Events. Basically, what Live Events does is it offers you the opportunity to listen to me and to also pose questions, but they are typed out questions. So you have an opportunity to type out the questions that you might have for me. And at the end of the session, I will work through all the typed questions and respond to them. Essentially, and I must repeat this, essentially what this program does is we are catering for people who are developing their proposals at master's and doctoral level. We are catering for those who are writing their chapters at master's and doctoral level. We're catering for those who have aspirations to write for publication at master's and doctoral level. We cater for individuals with grant writing aspirations at master's and doctoral. Also, we'll be offering, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the academic integrity course that we run, and that walks you through things like referencing, how to avoid plagiarism, and those types of things. We also, as part of the program, offer the opportunity for you to give us feedback about specific topics that you would like us to home in on and kind of blast. And we call those sessions blast sessions. So as we progress during the progression of this, we will have opportunities for us to tackle very specific things that groups of students have identified as problems. So typically things like how to write a literature review are things that we can blast in our blast sessions. Also, you have the right, if your supervisor believes that you are struggling very specifically with something and they need you to have one-to-one support, we have an ability that allows us to obtain a referral, as it were, from your supervisor for us to provide one-to-one support. There's often a lot of misunderstanding about what this program is. This program is an ancillary support, so we complement what you are getting from your supervisor. We are not your supervisor, we complement it. I will say that again, we are not supervisors, but we complement it. And the way in which you complement things are, in essence, what we do is we make you almost a plug and play student, and I will explain what I mean by that. We give you all the knowledge that you need to have to make initial decisions about where you want to take your study. You will of course go and meet your supervisor and they may have a differing opinion, which is what the game of research is all about. That research is literally about choices. You make choices, but what's most important is understanding that you have to be able to defend the choice you make. So we will give you the skills to understand all the choices that are available to you. We will give you the skills to understand the implications of each of the choices. And then we, by all accounts, expect that you will make an appropriate choice for your study. So, but of course, I want to be very clear, we do this a lot. This is the fourth group that we're facilitating this with. So this is the third cycle, but we were doing previous things before the counting of the cycle. And it's probably the 44th cycle for me because I've done it at very different places in different times. So in essence, you know, I tend to think you should give a lot of gravitas or a lot of attention to the things we give you guidance on, because we have been exposed. We have been exposed for many a time. But that said, remember that we are there to support your supervisor. So ultimately, the journey that you're involved in, depends on this interplay between the support we give you and the resources your supervisor avails to you. We are also aware of the fact that many of the students cannot attend every one of these sessions as and when we plan them. So we create it in such a way that there is what we call asynchronous access. You can find and get these recordings at any time outside of this live event that we have. We will also avail to you the PowerPoint slides that you'll have access to. They will become available to you after the session. So what we tend to do, and I will be doing this in a second, is that when I start to do the presentation proper, I will turn off the camera just to allow those of you who have limited bandwidth to keep up with the visual presentation that you will have. And once you've got that visual presentation, it becomes the focus of your engagement with me over my face. When it's time to do questions and answers at the end, I will open up my face and then look through the questions and answers that you've presented to me. Remember, the duration of my conversation with you is sometimes an hour and a half or a little bit under that. But what I advise is that people start to type out their questions if they have any as we proceed. Also, the way the program is run is that we do very specific things, and the view that I hold is that we prioritize questions that relate to the specific item that we're presenting over generic questions. So sometimes students will come and they'll have a question that deals with an issue that's 10 weeks in advance. I will look at it. Depending on what the implications of answering it are, we will respond. But sometimes the implications of answering questions that are asked ahead of time is that it means we're giving you an answer without you having the necessary content for you to engage with that answer. So the tendency is that we try to limit that. Today's session is about how to develop or build on your topic and establish the focus of your study. So that is essentially how you come up. Firstly, how you confirm that what you think is a worthy topic is indeed a worthy topic. How you confirm or how you articulate or share with the reader the problem that you're researching, and how you basically confirm things like the aim, the objectives, and the research questions. That's what we're doing tonight. I must say it's not an easy entry point. Many times I have to do this session 3-4 times for everybody to get it. And often people will ask, does this topic sound like it's doctoral? Does this topic sound like it's not? And the issue is, every topic can have a doctoral potential. Every topic can fall short of that doctoral or master's requirement. A large part of it is to do with the handler, the person who's handling the topic, how they position it, how they problematize it, how they focus their objectives. So that is essentially what we're going to do today. But before we get into that, I appreciate that this is the first session that we're going to have, And because of that, I want to share a little bit about the actual program itself, so you can see the content that you're having to deal with. So I'm hoping that in front of you, you've got the initial few pages that speak to you so you can understand a little bit about how we run this program. So each of you would have been sent a schedule that looks something like this. And from the 4th to the 17th of May, we had set up access for people to utilize and access our academic integrity MOOC. And that MOOC is a massive open online course, MOOC, and that is in itself is a self-paced 3-week course on issues to do with academic integrity. So all that training about how you reference, how you paraphrase academically, how you avoid all these pitfalls that are associated with academic and scholarly activity. That course was opened specifically to allow you insights into that. There's a session link. If you look to the right, you see a session link, and each of these sessions that we've got have got a session link. And what this session link is basically is it's a link that you click on, and if you click onto that, it takes you to where you would find this course. Similarly, on the 23rd of May, we had a launch event. Those of you who have not watched this launch event, I urge you to go and watch it, because it speaks a lot about, it speaks at great length about what the program is. It speaks at great length about the different components of the program. And if you click on that link, even though the event has occurred, click on it. It will take you to the actual event so that you can watch the recording for that event. Similarly, today is the 30th of May. You notice we have a link for tonight, and we have links for all the subsequent things that we were going to do. Now, many of you will have become aware of the fact that this program is incremental. So we build you up. We build you up, and once we build you up, we move from the very first part. As you notice, if you look at this, we are helping you here to set up your topic. But once you've set up your topic, people are expected then to speak about how deal with the literature that relates to the topic. So you notice the initial June sessions that we have are focused on the topic. All these things, all the sessions currently have my name, but all throughout the program, we identify alternatives to me who will present where I am not available to. So there is already quite a number of people that we have identified who will be supporting this. Then you will notice that we also have, apart from dealing with the different topics as you incrementally go through your chapter or your dissertation or your thesis, you will notice that we have these open Monday student support sessions. And what we do with these sessions is that we basically set up the time for you as students to join us. We will start at 6 p.m. and maybe allow up to about 15:15 or thereabouts for me to introduce something. But while I'm introducing that something, to afford you an opportunity to write up questions. And once a good range of questions have been offered by the student, we then proceed to deal with questions almost in a question and answer workshop format, Of course, there are assumptions that are embedded in this. The assumption is that whoever facilitates this has the ability to respond to every question that is posed to them. Of course, that in itself may not always be the case, but as I say, we have people who have kind of traveled this journey in many varied ways. So in all likelihood, we'll be fine. Now, not every week has got an open Monday session, so we progress, and you see that the different sessions speak to you about the different methodologies, how you work through each of the different methodologies. We also, towards the end, around July, when we think everyone has got adequate content, we walk them through a fully fledged proposal and all that type of stuff. So this is, and then of course you see we already have an argumentative and debative academic writing. That's a blast session that's been prepared. In essence, the thing to remember is, so some people have asked for blast sessions about how to develop sampling plans. Some have asked for blast sessions on writing abstracts. Some have asked for blast sessions on motivation during their studies. All these things that you want have got links. These links, of course, if you click on a link ahead of a session, you will find that it says the meeting has not begun or the event has not begun. But if you click on a link that is for an event that was occurred, you will then discover that there is material for you that you can access. So basically, that is the first exposure that I have for you. And now what I'm going to do is to get into the session that we have got today. And that will orientate you then to all the issues that relate to developing your topic, developing the focus, and engaging on the questions that need to be engaging on your actual question for your study. So I will take a minute to do this, and once again, I will need to come off. All right. Okay, so right. Okay. I should, in a second, be able to put this out there. Right. Okay. Now, remember once again that this initial session is really around assisting you to develop your topic, assisting you to clarify your focus, assisting you to confirm that the thing that you think you want to study is indeed a study-worthy topic. Okay? So, firstly, all that we do, everything that we do in this module and going forward is really around research, living out the requirements of research. So to do that, one of the things we're going to look at is operationalizing this concept of research, looking at definitions, looking at some things that tell you a lot more about what the activities that are central to research look like. So that's the first thing. Then, of course, I've spoken already about the fact that if you're going to choose a study and you're choosing a topic, the topic only makes sense if you are able to problematize it effectively. And by that, I'm basically saying that research is concerned with understanding problems. So if your focus area cannot be presented as a problem, then in essence, it becomes unresearchable because we only research things that are problems or phenomena that have questions that need to be answered. So unless you can make whatever you're focusing on have the true face of a complete problem, then you've got yourself a difficult space. You are actually engaging on something that is not seen as viable research, but more times than not, the limitations are not to do with the subject matter. The limitations are to do with you, the researcher, who has failed to understand how to make your chosen area become a worthy problem. So that's essentially what one part of this session is about. Going on from that, we're going to look at things that we call problem magnifiers. So remember, if research is about problems, then it makes sense that for research work to appear viable, it needs to represent a significant enough problem. And for it to represent that significant enough problem, we use certain operators, we use certain things to magnify that problem. And this is what I will teach you the skill to. I will teach you the skill to magnifying your research problem so it actually has traction. Because remember, as I said earlier on, the success or completeness of a research focus has very little to do with whether the problem you've chosen is in itself deserving to be seen as a research problem, but it has everything to do with whether you, the person who is developing that study, has magnified the problem sufficiently so that the problem has the competence or the components in it to make it a worthy research problem. So there are a number of research problem magnifiers that are used regularly in research to help you to magnify that problem that you have. Then once you've got the problem, there are issues around how you develop an aim, and I will speak you through that. Then I will teach you how you develop or you work on research objectives that make sense to the world of research. So you need to have objectives that are incremental, objectives that align with your terminal requirements. When I say exit outcomes, so you want objectives that look like your work is a master's piece of work, objectives that look like your work is a doctorate. And all of that is not happenstance, it's not chance. It doesn't just happen by chance. You have to do certain things to get it right. So this session will allow you to do that. Then, of course, I will give you some very quick hints about how you move from having research objectives and how those research objectives give you the framework for what your research questions will look like. So that is, and remember, if you can do that, and many students will spend even 5-6 weeks sorting out everything that I told you is what we are aiming to do here. So if we can enable you to get this right, and there are many of you already think you've got proposals, some of you are even writing up your dissertations and theses and you're in chapter 4, but no one has ever subjected your aim, your objectives to the level of rigor that we are going to put you through with this. So there's every expectation that it would make sense for you to even look at this as a retrospective lesson. I've had many students who come here saying they're about to submit their dissertation, but they read and hear some of these original things, early considerations, and they go back and tidy up their work, because it's never too late to tidy up things and never ever too late. In any case, now back to what the conversation is about right now. So in scholarly activity, all scholarly activity, we are obsessed with defining things. And the reason we define things is that often the definitions are so thorough that they contain all the primary activities that are central to whatever it is that we're defining. So in very much the same term, this issue about what research is has been defined widely by many people I had previously. Many of the definitions are quite comprehensive, but I am particularly impressed by one definition that I think helps to orientate students to what the business of research is about. And this is the definition by Sackett et al. Basically, this definition sees research as systematic, rigorous, and logical investigation that aims to answer questions about a phenomena of interest or problem. And the question then is, so what? Now, the so what that I want to show you is embedded in this are all the things that you should do in research at every opportunity of your existence. So the expectation is that everything you do in research should have, when you are doing it, you should ask yourself, has this thing that I'm doing got evidence that I was systematic in the way I've approached it? Has this thing got evidence that I've been rigorous in the way I've approached it? Has this thing got evidence that I've pursued a logical process for getting to where I'm getting to? Is my focus in my work targeted at answering questions about a phenomena of interest or a problem? So if your work consistently, if everything you do about your study carries all these dimensions in it, then you are indeed involved in research. But what people do is they study and they do things where some of this is there and some of it is not there. And then they wonder why critiques of their work find particular weaknesses around how their work has been done. So what I want to show you now is that I'm going to break down this definition in a way that will tell you in no uncertain terms what the expectations research has of you are. The expectations of research in general, not your supervisor. Research as a scholarly activity demands that, one, you are systematic. And systematic means, in this context, understanding that every choice and every activity that you do in research must be informed by a system of knowledge, that it should be informed by a system of knowledge. So every choice that you make, if you decide that I'm going to do interviews, there has to be a system of knowledge that has informed you to decide that interviews are what your study is doing and not any other data collection approach. If you decide I need to interview men and not women, there will be a system of knowledge that has guided you towards believing that that gender option is the one that is appropriate for you. If you decide that you are going to do retrospective study, a study of the past as opposed to a study of the future, the decision about you being retrospective versus anything else is guided by a system of knowledge. So any decision you make, no matter how small the decision you make, if you decide and it's inside the context of research, the expectation is that if someone were to question you, what is the system of knowledge that informed your decision, you should be able to name it. So that's the first thing. Research is systematic. Everything that's research-based comes from and is supported by, informed by, guided by a system of knowledge. That's the first thing. Second issue is this issue of rigor. This issue of the fact that all research is rigorous. And what rigorous means that you consider all the options that are possible in relation to anything to show rigor. So if someone says they chose to approach their study through qualitative inquiry, the expectation is that you would have looked at non-qualitative options such as quantitative research, mixed methods research, and rigorously tested them to get a sense of whether they are the right thing. So essentially everything about anything you do in research has to show that you have been rigorous. And rigor is about considering every other option outside of the one that you think is your preference. How you articulate it differs depending on situations. So you may find that when people write up their work, they don't demonstrate to you that they had a rigorous process, but they themselves know they had a rigorous process. And the reason they might not demonstrate something is that if you make a choice that falls broadly in line with average behavior, then you don't have to defend it so much. So you don't have to show the world that, look, I was rigorous and I looked at all the other options until I arrived at this. And the reason you don't do that is because the choice you would have made already carries with it the legacy of having been the preferred option in your field. So you don't have to defend it as much because it's the expected norm. But the minute you are starting to choose things that fall outside of the expected norm, then you have to demonstrate your rigor much more openly. So people who make a choice that is unexpected demonstrate their rigor more. They show their rigor much more than those who've chosen the standardized expected responses. But nonetheless, everything about research is rigorous. Everything you do, you make the choice because you've considered all the other known options and you've decided that in spite of what you know about the other options, you still choose this option that you have chosen. That's what rigor is. Then logical investigation talks about making sure that everything that happens in research follows a logical thinking pattern. And logic is not singular. What people mistake is that they will say logic and being linear are the same. They are not. So in research, we ask of you to be logical rather than linear. And what we mean by logical is that you should make sets of choices that you can explain in a way that shows people the process you went through, the rationale that you considered, and that the rationale you considered makes sense. So when we talk about logical investigation, we are talking about the ability for you to rationalize the set of choices that you have made. It is not that you choose the same thing all the time. It is more to do with the fact that whatever you choose, you can demonstrate the thinking behind it, explain it, and defend it appropriately. The very fact that what I'm saying is that when I say research is not linear, I'm actually telling you that I can give all of you one issue to deal with, and each of you can approach it very differently, as long as you show me that you have been systematic, rigorous, and your choices are logical. Not linear, but logical. Then we say, in research, whatever you do aims to answer questions about a phenomenon of interest or a problem. So the unit of departure is the problem. If you cannot show that the thing you're studying is of phenomena of interest or is a problem, then there is no basis for what you are studying. So at the very core of everything, we must show without any contention whatsoever that your study is looking at a phenomena of interest and a problem. And that the process of showing interest, showing that a phenomena has enough interest, showing that a phenomena is problematic, that is something you need to be taught. So that's what the session today will do. The research process, folks, is nothing more than just a methodical step-by-step approach to finding, examining all the different reliable sources of resources on a particular problem area. So really, the research process is the methodical step-by-step process that people go through to achieve systematic, rigorous, and logical investigations. That's all. But what sticks out, and you must remember this, if you get that systematic, rigorous, logical investigation story that aims to answer questions about a phenomena of interest or a problem, you are done. There's nothing more to worry about. Now, I've said to you, and this is a repetition, is that research has some very universal characteristics, regardless of what it is. So that being systematic, the rigor, the logical exploration, all of that are universal. You'll find them regardless of what type of research we're talking about. Of course, when we talk about logical investigation, we are saying that you are making decisions that are based on a series of thoughtful decisions that you have looked at. Now, research, when people talk about it, they can talk about 10 different phases, and we'll talk about the research process at some point. But people will say that the research process is made up of stages. Some books define or describe 20 stages, some describe 7, some describe 4, but all of them are pretty much doing the same thing. They tell you that the first phase of your research is where you conceive your idea, you conceptualize it, you build it. Then once you built it, the second phase is where the phase that we call the planning phase, where you now know what you're going to do and you plan for it. The third phase is when you more than just plan for it, you now actually carry out the research, and we call that the empirical phase, the phase where people are out in the field collecting data. But now today, this thing that we're looking at around the topic development belongs exclusively in the phase of conception. So this phase of conception is where you conceive, you make up your topic, you make sure the topic has all the characteristics of being a researchable, viable thing. So it's the process where you develop, you refine all your abstract ideas, you think about them, you rethink them, you read literature and you make theories about what's going on, you make decisions about what you're moving for, you review and you do all sorts of things around your ideas. And there are basic 4 steps that happen. Not all of them happen in every study, but they're essentially what occurs. The first stage is where you formulate your research problem, then you determine exactly what you are aiming to do in your study. Then after that, you of course now search literature to get an understanding of what the arguments that are prevailing in that space are, to get a sense of what the places where people agree in relation to a topic are. You get a sense of where people disagree. You get a sense of where there is unanswered questions. That's the second step. The third step is you realize that, hey, I now know where people argue, but I need to understand what theories I need to have to understand this topic well. So you engage in a theoretical construction of the tentative research. All this will teach you so you get a sense of it. Then after that, depending on the nature and type of research you're involved in, you create a hypothesis. A hypothesis being a statement that people make as a projection of what they expect to see. So if you're studying something and you expect to see a relationship between this and that, you would then make a hypothesis saying, you believe that there is a positive relationship between people's exposure to violent TV and their ultimate behavior in terms of how violent they are. So that could be a hypothetical statement, but that's what you go to. In any case, before you begin any of this, when you conceptualize, your very, very, very first thing that you do is you make what's called, you formulate your problem. And formulation of problems is a very straightforward thing. Normally how it starts is people will be exposed to something. They have an anecdotal observation of a phenomena. So you may be someone who reads, and in your reading, you guys just come across people complaining about a topic, and then you think, oh, I'm very interested in this topic. So you become clear that this is a topic you want to pursue because of your personal interest in it. You think it has a question that resonates with you. Some people choose a topic because they've been victims of the phenomena they're looking at. So some people might be involved in a car accident and then experience some trauma, and they think, oh, I want to study this trauma and car accidents and so forth. Of course, there are limits to how far people can go. You need to already possess an undergraduate qualification that vaguely represents the phenomena that you end up being interested in. So you can't, an engineer can't suddenly find something from physiotherapy, for example, and decide that, oh, I've been exposed to the problem, that's what my study will be. It's not quite like that. But this idea that anecdotal exposure directs people to identifying a phenomena of interest, that I think we can't contest. We know that if someone is left in a specific area, exposed to something very specific, they are likely to be interested in it, and as a result also might want to study it. But you cannot use that exposure to the phenomena as an acceptable scholarly reason for why you are studying something. It just would not cut it. You cannot at 2 o'clock be exposed to something, get home and say, oh, my research is going to be about this because I became exposed to it. Remember, research is about being rigorous. And the rigor is now saying, look, I've seen this phenomena. I need to understand this phenomena that I've noticed from every angle possible. And how you then build the other angles is where the scholarly combination of activities starts to play a part. That you know that you observing a problem is not the basis for you saying this is a topic you want. And many students unfortunately fall for this, eh? They fall for this idea when they write their work. They'll say, oh, the study they're doing was motivated by their personal experience. That personal experience can be a partial motivation, but is by no means an acceptable motivator for why you do a study. You don't just decide. Research does not allow that. What we then do is people actually use other types of motivations for motivating them towards choosing a particular study focus as their focus. And other motivations could be practice-based. So some people may experience something themselves, but then they work in the field and they go and speak to other practitioners in the field, and they get a sense that, oh, this problem that I've noticed is not only exclusive to me, it's actually much more industry-wide. So now they know that, their problem has got much more traction than them themselves. And then finally, people will be guided by empirical evidence. And empirical evidence means that you may, after you've had your personal experience of a phenomena, decide that, hey, I want to go and check if what I have found is referred to in the literature and what the literature says about this thing that I'm interested in. And often people then do what we call a preliminary review. So they go and they look at all the research that they can find on this phenomena that they initially stumbled on by mistake, essentially. So they choose that, they choose this thing, and but the empirical evidence now gives them a confirmation that, hey, that thing that you saw in your everyday life is actually written about in the literature, and it constitutes a global problem. So in essence, when you are telling us what the problem that you're interested in is and how it was motivated, you must show us the empirical motivations. And more than any of the other lower level observations, because anecdotal observations are usually explainable by pure chance. There are people who can just say, look, there's a chance that what I saw and what I did was purely a function of coincidence. So on that basis, it's impossible for someone to assume that their chosen research problem is itself worthy, because it could be chance. But if you go and you look at empirical evidence, and the evidence shows you that, hey, this phenomena you thought existed has been reported by X, reported by Y, there's research to show it exists, that will assist you to formulate your questions on why or how the phenomena that you're interested in originated. It will also help you to gain insights into the areas where those who have written about the phenomena confirm that there's uncertainties or apparent gaps of knowledge. Anything that is not known or understood in relation to the topic will become better explained as you explore the empirical evidence. And of course, as you explore the evidence, you will find that there are some who have offered thoughts about what the potential causal explanations for what you are seeing are. All these people become the basis for you saying, okay, this is how, if anyone is to ask me what the problem I'm interested in is, I can tell them my personal observation of it, but I can also share with them practice-based experiences. And finally, I can share with them empirical evidence so that they understand the gravity and the depth, the breadth of the phenomena that you're interested in. So once you are clear that this phenomena that you're looking at represents something that is problematic and of interest, then we go into determining now how you formulate that problem in a very refined way so that it meets all the requirements of a viable research problem. And of course, once you're clear that the research problem can be understood and is solvable, then your next step is determining the range of methods that should be used to understand it or to deal with it. And sometimes people go all this way and they discover that actually they've read about this thing, it's all got all the potential requirements of a problem, but in actual fact, it's not researchable. It's not researchable for one reason or another. Then, of course, if you are a student at that stage, you think, oh, I don't want a problem that's not researchable. I must go back and rethink the problem or identify another one. But assuming you think you have researched and found a problem, there is this killer requirement. This slide that you have in front of you is the absolute gem that you need to have attended to so that you make sure that you have a golden topic. Because once you have golden topic, golden problem, everything else that comes from it is actually just a rollout of this golden topic. And how I like to think about this. So if you have a problem and you show the different dimensions of it, the multidimensionality of that problem, you do an exceptional job in letting the reader see all the layers about the problem that you're interested in so that they can truly believe in the fact that this problem is worthy of the attention you're giving it, it's worthy of the research you're giving it. It also, if you give good dimensionality to the problem, it also sets you up for you to have great objectives and so forth. It is essentially no different from a person who wants to drive from point A to point C. If you are using satellite navigation or some GPS system to guide you, unless you input the right address for where you want to go, you will never find the destination, never ever. And this thing of focusing your problem is literally the act of, it equates in that metaphor that I gave you, it equates to you putting in the right coordinates, the right address of where you're going. If you get that wrong, then no matter how you do, the entire machinery of your research study will not work. So I always say to people, if you're going to spend any length of wasted time, waste it getting your focus appropriately problematized. And now to problematize it, there are certain things that once again are called problem magnifiers. And the first problem magnifier that you do is to show, to demonstrate that the problem that you're looking at has a global, continental, national, and local existence. So if you're able to say, look, I want to study this, let me see what the global statistics for it, what the global picture of it is, how it is reported on globally. And then you also try to see if there's literature that specifies the continental appearance of it, and look at whether there's literature that shows this thing that you're interested in to be a problem at a national level, all the way up to the corridor where you are studying your study. But you start in a funnel type of fashion with the highest order of interest being the globe, and then you go to your continent, nation, then locality. And if you can show that this thing that you're looking at has got an existence and a face at all these levels, you showed us the first thing. You showed us that this problem of yours is not an individual whimsical thing that you just chose because you want to satisfy a particular interest. You are showing us that this problem has got a face. It is a face that goes beyond your own little area of interest. That face goes all the way to the rest of the world. And trust me, there is no topic that does not do that if it's a good topic. So someone might say, hey, I want to study why my colleagues at work bully each other. Then you think, oh, work-based bullying. This work-based bullying is sometimes referred to as horizontal violence. And you look and you realize that, goodness, this has been reported in the Americas, it's been reported in Europe, it's been reported in Australasia, it's been reported in North America, South America. Now you're showing that this thing you're looking at, as much as it's a problem for you in your little office, it has a global presence. Then, so you give some insights into how it manifests itself globally. What are the statistics there? What are the assertions that researchers have made, and so forth. And then the next thing is this thing that we call topicality. Now, if someone were to come to you and say this issue is topical, what they are literally saying to you is that this issue that they've chosen and you are going to be part of has a here and now interest that stands it out from other things in terms of the here and now appearance of it. So that topicality refers ultimately to whether something is a concern in the current moment. And how you confirm topicality is quite simple. If you choose a topic, say if you chose a topic from management studies, management sciences, then one would expect you to go and look at some key journals that are related to management sciences and see whether this topic you've chosen, does it get referred to in all this current literature about management studies? And if you can demonstrate and have examples of how contributors and researchers are commenting on this and still asking questions about it, you can show that this thing is indeed topical. That's one way of magnifying a problem, showing it that everyone worries about it here and now. So how acute is it? What is the here and now picture of your thing, of your topic? The other focus that you have is demonstrating relevance. Demonstrating relevance is similar to topicality, but relevance is different. When I ask if something, when I talk about relevance in research, I'm talking about the extent to which something has represented a concern for a discipline for a long term or something that is a chronic existence as a problem. So if, say, you were still doing something in management studies and I ask you to demonstrate the relevance of something, I'm actually asking you to look back at old research in that field and look chronologically across the research over the course of time to see whether this problem you're interested in seems to have been a concern for that industry or for that discipline for years running. So if something is a concern and is an area of interest for years running because researchers keep writing about it and commenting that it remains unresolved, then it has relevance. And something like that, say in management studies, could easily be, some of you will be aware that for generations, people have debated the characteristics and traits of leaders, that they will say, look, what are the 10 most important things that make someone a good leader and so forth. That conversation has been going on for years. Even when kings were around, it's been around. It still represents a problem that people in management studies argue about because the idea of who will manage who is still a relevant, fought for topic. So by that determination, this issue of leadership, traits and so forth is relevant because it has shown that it has long-term resonance. It has a chronic presence. It lasts and lasts and lasts. Now, the final magnifier is topic significance. So some topics, when you choose it, you can show that it is important and significant by looking at the numbers that the literature talks about. So it will say, hey, this problem affects 1 in 8 people or something, 4 in 6 people or whatever. Then statistically, you can show now that this problem that I've chosen is very important because its existence covers everything. Its existence starts at covers a significant proportion of the population. So for that reason, it cannot be ignored. You cannot ignore a topic whose appearance is global in terms of its reach with statistics. So if you are able to identify a problem and the problem, you read up on it and there's lots of statistics about how widespread the problem is and so forth, that is one way of showing its presence and its magnitude. Then in that same significance world, there's an understanding that not everything is important because of its high numbers. Some things are important just by their subjective nature or their experiential nature. And what I mean by that is that there are some topics that, or experiences or phenomena that may not occur commonly, but when it does occur, it represents a very distressing problem, challenging problem for the discipline, for society at large. So those types of studies, you can choose it, not because of the numbers involved, but by the nature of the phenomena you're studying. Typical example, the abduction of children by parents. Parents can abduct their own children. Statistically, it's not common, in terms, if you think of the fact that countries can have millions of children, and in that country they can report 45 cases of parental abduction. So 45 in millions is literally insignificant. And if you were to gauge the importance of that topic on the numbers, you would come back and say, look, the numbers are too low for us to justify that it's a worthy topic. But topic significance goes beyond just numbers. Some things are important by virtue of their numbers. Some things are important by just the nature of what is going on. So the idea that a parent could steal a child from another parent is so grotesque and so problematic for the human condition that it becomes a worthy research topic, not because of the numbers, but because of the subjective, normative, and experiential attributions that people give to it. So it just feels terrible. So if you have a problem, if you have a research problem that you can show to have all these dimensions, and you can demonstrate as much of all these dimensions when you're describing the problem, you've got a perfect problem. But not every research problem has all these dimensions. If you have a research problem or something you think is a problem, and it can't even demonstrate one of these dimensions, then it's not a research problem. You go back to the drawing board. If you have a problem that has all the dimensions, then that's perfect. That is perfect, perfect, perfect. And the more of these dimensions you can demonstrate in your problem overview, the better. You are saying, look, this problem affects the whole world. This problem is affecting us here and now. This problem has persevered for years. This problem has exceptionally high numbers, and the nature of it is unacceptable. Now, if you can problematize your focus like that, you're good to go. You are perfectly poised. Now, in this world, remember, once you have a problem or you have articulated your problem, your next journey as a researcher is to now understand and answer questions that relate to that question. And the format by which we do this is through the generation of an aim, through the generation of objectives, and through the generation of questions. What I need to do, just for the sake of ensuring clarity, so that you as listeners to this can differentiate things. Once again, I use that example of a journey. So think of yourself as someone who's traveling from point A to point F. And point F being you're traveling from one town where you live to another town. So the aim of your study becomes the aim of traveling from point A to the end of your study. So then the aim of your study becomes that ultimate knowledge aspiration that you have. What is the thing that you want to know in relation when you get to the end of the study? What do you want to know? And this is the point where somebody might say, look, my aim is to be able to offer, my aim is to be able to understand or to develop insights into the causes of X. That becomes your aim. So you are saying, look, when I am in that journey of a car, the aim is your final destination. So in this example, the aim becomes the highest knowledge acquisition you want to know in relation to the phenomena you are interested in. The objectives, on the other hand, are the small stopping points that you walk to get to the aim. So essentially, when we talk about the objectives of a study, we are saying, look, you are starting from point A and you want to get to point F. The aim of your study is point F. So the knowledge that you are aiming for when you get to F, that is the aim. The objectives are step A, step B, step C, step D, step E, and then F is the aim. So objectives represent the small singular steps that you walk as you walk towards the aspiration of understanding this thing that you need to clarify. So the aim are the specific steps you will take to achieve your aim. And of course, when we talk about objectives, we're talking about knowledge objectives here. Hey? The things you need to know to progress yourself towards that ultimate thing that you believed you needed to know. So those are the aims versus the objectives. Now, people will say, hey, how do I get the research questions? Folks, research questions are very easy once you've got objectives, because the research questions are actually the objectives turned into questions. So if your first objective was to determine the extent of a problem, so if you wanted to determine the extent to which COVID-19 affects your neighborhood, that research question then is what the corresponding research question is, what is the extent of damage from COVID-19? So the aims and objectives, really, once you know the objectives, you just take that objective statement and turn it into a questioning statement. And that's what the thing is. So in research, it's quite common that people do something. So as I've said to you, research is about a knowledge acquisition journey, the journey you go through to gain enough knowledge to understand something. But sometimes, once people understand something, they want to develop an output so that they can frame this understanding in a model, in a framework. So you may find that people's objectives have an additional objective that's to do with turning that knowledge they've got into a framework. So maybe the last objective in your study will be to develop a model, to develop a framework, to develop this. But that objective is not part of research. That objective is you operationalizing your research. You're kind of saying, look, this is the knowledge I have, I want to implement it. So you will find that when people write out their objectives, they might have 5 objectives, but the last objective is to do with developing something. That objective can't be subjected to a research question. So if you have 5 objectives and the last one is a developing objective, then you only have 4 viable objectives, and therefore you will only have 4 viable research questions. So when someone says, does a study have the exact same number of objectives as it does questions? It may not. If your last objective is not an objective about knowledge acquisition, then it's likely that you have one more objective than you are likely to have as research questions. Now, that part I've taught you folks, please go back and listen to it over and over and over again, because it needs that. You really do need that to get this. Now, I've spoken to you about objectives, and then people say, so how do we know how to better understand these objectives that we have? How do we know how to order our objectives? And the way you order them is thanks to a man called Benjamin Bloom. Benjamin Bloom basically came up with what he called the taxonomy. Taxonomy is kind of a group of ideas that have been grouped together in a way that allows you to develop a framework for understanding something. So in the 1950s, actually 1957, this guy Benjamin Bloom, he came up. Basically, he was in teaching, hey. And basically what he came up with is he recognized that every time people get to understand something, there's actually a process by which you learn and think and learn stuff. That every time you learn about something, the very first thing that you do is you just grapple and grasp the basic concepts of that thing that you're learning about. So he said the first step that people get into is they understand. They have knowledge of something, then they understand it. And once they understand it, probably the next thing they do is they want to use it. So they apply it. And then once they've applied it, they think, I'm using this thing. I wonder how my use of it is seen by different people from different angles. So they analyze this knowledge that they have, and so forth and so forth. But his argument was that the order in which we learn things is incremental. It starts from the basic knowledge all the way to the top. And he also made very specific assertions about the fact that certain groups of people, certain groups of learning activity are limited to certain levels of thinking. I will explain that in simple English. His argument was that if you give a bachelor's degree student something, all that they are required by virtue of their bachelor's degree to do is to describe what they see, to apply what they see, and probably to analyze it, look at it from different angles. That's all, nothing more. He then said, but if you give a master student, they do more than just analysis. They describe what they've seen, they apply it, they analyze it, look at it from different angles. Then they start to consider all these different angles and add them up to come up with what they believe is really going on. And that's the synthesis bit. Then he argued that, but hang on, doctoral students do even more than that. They synthesize, they evaluate what's going on, then they come up with their own new thing. So you realize that the taxonomy that he came up with does this. It tells you the 6 incremental types of knowledge that you become, you cognitively become conditioned for the more you engage with something. So he said, if you're understanding anything that is cognitive awareness, you start by gaining basic knowledge of it, or remembering and understanding it. You comprehend it. You now say, I know this thing. The next thing is I understand this thing. The next thing is I can use this thing, which is application. The next thing is I can look at this thing from all sorts of angles. Then the next thing is, even though I see all those angles, I know which one makes the most sense, the synthesis. Then the final one is more really to do with assessing whether something is important or not. So he argued that when you get to meet something, this is the order of knowledge development that you go through. Others have come up with the taxonomy and they've suggested that, you know, instead of using knowledge, you can use a word like remembering. Instead of using comprehension, you can use understanding, and so forth. Everything they've said is pretty much the same. There's 1 or 2 things that they've played with, because some people will say, look, you need to understand, analyze something before you apply it. But in the past, he argued that people do something, then they analyze it, like act and then think. The new people are saying, no, people think, then they act. And anyway, and then the other thing, the one thing that was very clear with him was that he said, look, ultimately at the highest order, the most complicated thing someone can do is to see something, analyze it, pull it together, see what the best mode of doing is, and then create their own. That creation becomes the highest level of the highest level of cognitive ability that someone has. And that is why when you look at doctorates, people will tell you that a doctorate has to create an original contribution. All of that comes from Bloom's appreciation that the highest form of demonstrating that you know and understand a topic is to be able to create something, new knowledge that relates to this thing you're looking at. Now, so what? Now, folks, you look at this. If you know that the way people develop their knowledge and understanding around any topic is to go through this progressive list of things, does it not make sense that your first objective will be about you gaining knowledge about the topic? And that is why objective 1 is normally you saying, I want to determine, I want to gain understanding, I want to develop insights into X. Your next objective might be to understand how this thing is applied in practice. The next objective might be to analyze the different angles that relate to this phenomena you're interested in. The next objective might be to do with to comprehensively consider the different modes that exist in relation to something. Then the next thing is you might have an objective that says evaluate. Then your final objective is you saying, I'm going to develop and create a new model. So you realize that your objectives, the order of your objectives is created by this taxonomy. You don't have to prick everything on the taxonomy, but the general direction is that you cannot have your first objective be an evaluative objective. Then your second one is knowledge. Your third one is analysis. Your fourth one is application. Once you do that, it's haphazard. And you need to then pay very close attention to this to this thing. Now, that, folks, was just a taster, just a beginning taster of how you go about identifying objectives. So you now know what the problem is. I have now given you the tools for saying, if you want to understand the problem, what is your point of departure? What is the final aim that you have? And what are the small steps that you are going to use? And when you use those steps, remember that the first step represents very foundational cognitive ability. The second one, less foundational, more progressive, and so forth and so forth and so forth. All in the guide of Bloom's taxonomy. So that is the session that we have got today. What I want to now do is to unshare this and to consider the questions that are being asked by you as a collective. And I just want to look at, I just want us to consider, right, okay, there we go. Okay, I'm going to now look at the questions that have been posed, and I hope that I can then assist in responding to these. Right. Okay. So how global must the problem be to be deemed worthy of research? National, global, provincial, or does a community problem also apply? Folks, I think there's a, when I talk about global nature of a problem, I'm saying that your problem has to exist globally. And when I'm talking globally, it has to be a worldwide acknowledged phenomena. It may express itself differently in your neighborhood, but it must have a connection with a worldwide phenomena of some sort. No matter what you choose. I mean, you can choose, you can literally be in your area and study witchcraft and decide that, look, this problem of witchcraft you're interested in is reported across the world by different people and so forth and so forth. So it is not, you are showing that this issue you have chosen has got a global capability. How old must be the literature review? Folks, this issue about literature always comes up, and I find it a little bit strange, but it's always asked. If you want to generate, to show that something is topical, for example, now that I've showed you that topicality matters, you can only show that by looking at current literature. So it has to be current. If you want to show that something is relevant, you are also going to look at older literature. So in essence, a literature review must possess all those things, old, new, medium. You hear people saying, oh, no, literature should be more than 5 years old. There is no such rule, really. The only rule is you need literature to substantiate that the problem you've got is indeed topical, it is indeed relevant. But if you are to apply some logical decision making, if you have 200 papers and you can only accommodate 50, would you choose all 50 to be old papers, or would you have a few seminal old papers and then make sure the rest of your study is new papers? That to me is a function of logical thinking and not about research. But the answer is that there is a relationship between the issues of topicality, of relevance to the choice about that you make in relation to literature. There are circumstances. Some people have circumstances where they're studying a topic that was last studied 25 years ago. So their circumstance means they won't have new material, but they must explain it. They need to do a rigorous explanation of why it is that they ended up with just this literature. Okay. There's someone who says, I wish to check with you. Basically, my supervisor recommended another topic for my thesis, and I'm working on it as we speak. My concern is based on the statement you made about changing into something that is completely new or that is not based on your scope of knowledge. How can one like me be assisted? Look, Folks, my suggestions are never quite black and white. So if you are in a department and you are, say, in the Department of History, and you go with one history topic and your supervisor and you negotiate a different history topic, it's still in history. So it's not really as divergent as you suggest, it's just a different angle. But if the divergence is substantial that you feel you are totally out of breath and couldn't be there at all, then one of two things is happening. You either have registered in the wrong department, or your supervisor's understanding of what your preliminary knowledge is faulty. And those two things are not natural positions. There's a problem there. But for me, the bigger issue is that any topic that is recommended to you by a supervisor is a negotiation. They say it's suggested to you, you go away and read up on it, and you come back and say, the material was supporting me in relation to this, or the material wasn't. Okay, so someone is concerned about the fact that research needs to be limited to fields of study. Folks, you register in departments that have you register in departments that have discipline boundaries. So as long as your study falls in those discipline boundaries, you're fine. But what you can't do is be a carpenter, register in a department of health studies, and then hope that your carpentry topic will fit. Or be a carpenter in a carpentry place and then have a study that is entirely from a health space. So all these things that I say are within the context of logical reasoning and so forth. When you do a topic search and you get results from a wide range view, what is not necessary in the field that one is knowledgeable in? Can I continue or limit myself in the field I'm interested in? Folks, when you choose a topic, it cannot be driven by a search. You can't just search on the internet and choose a topic, because the connectedness with you is not the space to do. So I gave you, when I was talking about conceptualization, and I was explaining that you need to have an anecdotal exposure, practice-based exposure, and all those things to drive you. And that's so it directs you to a realistic problem. If you do a Google search of interesting doctoral problems, you will have a challenge. It can work. It has worked for many people, but it has its problems, and those are the ones that I'm sharing with you. Someone says that their topic has been changed, but it's still within their field and so forth. Folks, that is totally appropriate. It happens all the time. Actually, it happens virtually all the time. But the thing I just wanted to say is, remember that you belong to a specific discipline, and whatever the change is, it needs to be accounted for, so that you don't end up with a study that has become something outside of the department that are looking after you. Okay, someone's asked about what if a problem is a result of local conditions, for example, cultural or gender social norms, which are particular to a local focus but have important implications. Folks, there is nothing that is unique to your locality, nothing. It may have different actors, they may refer to different dimensions, they may use different naming conventions for it, but the issue is the same. So when you talk about traditional orientated households, every nation has got a traditional angle. You go to America, there's the Native Americans who will do many of the things you do. You go to the north of Africa, you'll find these things. You go to Europe, you go to Australasia, you find Aborigines and so forth and so forth. So no topic really per se is unique to your area. It expresses itself uniquely in your area, but the generic considerations are global. So you need to demonstrate that, because remember, when you write your dissertation, it's not for your friends who live with you. It's actually given a signature of approval. Once you get a master's and a doctorate, those are universally accepted degrees, which means anyone on this world should pick it up at any one corner and be able to read it and derive some academic relevance. And that is where I'm coming from. I'm not saying pretend your topic or spend all the time showing the topic lives all over the world, but very few topics do not. And remember, I told you that problem magnifiers, there might be 8. You might only really work well with 3 or 4 of them. So you maximize those 4. It doesn't mean that every study has 8, but the more of the 8 you have, the better you are in terms of magnifying the problem. Look, there's a conversation about general aim and also specific aims. Research has no such thing. You have an aim, and then you have objectives. This idea of specific aims, no way. You have an aim, you have objectives. Of course, people have come with new age research terminologies to complicate things. You have an aim, you have objectives. Some of the objectives may be empirical objectives to do with actual field work. Some will be theoretical objectives to do with you gaining knowledge about certain theoretical things you're interested in. I would like to ask if researching, for example, advantages of implementing sign language in primary level education as a 12th official language topical. The way you know that is you go to the literary sources that talk about language and see whether actually or things that talk about the considerations and concerns of deaf people, whether they talk about creating this as a third language or wanting to give it that space. If it's spoken about and there's literature, then it is topical. So the assessment is little to do. It's little to do with it's little to do with the what's this? It's little to do with the focus of what you and I choose, but more to do with what those in the discipline that you're in are interested in. A question about mentioning the 10 catalytic niche areas. Folks, that is due for tomorrow, so I will do that tomorrow. It's impossible to consider catalytic niche areas before I have developed your own specific niche. So how niche areas work, and just as a brief response, is that when you do niche areas, it's literally a university declaring that, look, we have these 10 topics that we think are critical to us. No matter what field you're in, can you please find a way to integrate them into your study? Not make them your study, integrate. So you could be someone who's a theologian who studies theology, and one of the niche areas is to do with health. Would say, look, can you please give your study a health part to it, so that that niche area gets expression. And so, but then we can't add the conversation about niche areas until we're clear that your primary focus is understood. So tonight was about the primary focus. What is the recommended number of research objectives at PhD level? Folks, there is no such thing as recommended numbers. You would be suggesting that work is outside of the logical space. But between you and me, the taxonomy has 6 stages. So if you attribute and you speak to all the 6 stages at least once, you should get about 6. So most people will say anything from 5 to 8, but I really don't. At this level of study, you cannot go with template, because once you get a template, we are taking out that ability for you to apply logic to apply circumspection and all that sort of stuff. So you really, it's an answer I've given some guidance on, but it's not an answer I want to be aligned with, because it doesn't work like that. Can I use more than one model for my research? The answer to that is in upcoming sessions. How long must the research problem be for a research proposal? It all depends. Each of you write your research proposals to a template. The template will tell you. But remember, you wanted to express those dimensions that are problem magnifiers. I'm doing my honors degree. Am I required to write research as well? Look, we have invited honors degree students because some of your honors degrees, many of them have got a component at the end that is research. So knowing about this is important. You probably can get away with knowing less than what I'm sharing with you. The other thing is that honors has always been considered a gateway to masters. So to arrive on your master's without any exposure to this is suicidal. And that's the reason we offer honor students the ability to get into this. What is demarcation of the study entailed? Look, demarcation is just deciding where your interest starts, what are the things you're interested in, and what are you not interested in. Where do I demonstrate the global national existence? Folks, I told you when you are introducing and giving an overview of the problem, that's where you articulate and indicate your global. When you are describing the problem, you need to give context to this problem. So on your research proposal, there may be a section that says statement of the problem, background and overview of the problem. That's where you find these things. If your research seeks to explore different issues but in the same area, how do you set a single aim? For instance, the area might be HIV in the military, but you want to explore knowledge, attitudes, and perception HIV amongst military personnel in a country. At the same time, you want to examine existing military policies across countries. Any advice? The advice is don't do it. Folks, you are studying generally scholarly research has one aim. You do two aims, you're just asking for trouble. And I have overseen 2,000, 3,000 PhDs. Maybe I've met 8 students who did this and all of them failed. Without fail, they just failed. So you just need to stick to one aim. Sometimes what you might not understand is that one of those two things that you think are two aims are not actually two aims. Maybe one is an objective of the other, but if the two things are really aims, then choose one study, not both. What's the difference between general objectives, aim, and specific objectives? Folks, I'm not sure where the teachings around this exist, but those ideas do not exist. You have one aim, global aim. Sometimes people will call it a purpose. You have objectives. Sometimes people will refer to those objectives as theoretical objectives, or they refer to them as empirical objectives. Sometimes people will say if objectives are steps, then mini objectives are the smaller steps in between the steps. But really, those are not accepted concepts. They are just when people publish things and they want to become fancier, they include all those things. You do not need this. You must stick with the mainstream orthodox articulation, because that is what you will be judged against. Look, someone's asking about citing old theory. Remember, I told you that theory, there is a relevance part which allows you to show something that is old and existing. Then there's what's called seminal literature, literature that shapes the world. That literature you cite everywhere possible. Old, new, but it's seminal. It shaped our understanding. So that's how it works. And Bloom shaped our understanding. Every degree you know on Earth has its objectives based on Bloom. So you can, and people have revised it and they come up with 2020 versions of it, but ultimately the foundational document perseveres beyond most. Right, folks, those are all the questions answered. We have, I believe we have a session probably tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. I just need to be aware of this. I'm just going to very quickly look at my diary. Folks, the reason I appear to need to have these things is because I do so many of these sessions. Yes, tomorrow I've been advised, this time, same place, we do part 2 of this, and that will be where mention and discussion of the niche areas will be. On that note, I want to say thank you to